What if one normal monthly payment is quietly delaying your financial future? For millions of people, that payment isn't rent, it's the car and their driveway. Have you ever noticed something strange? A lot of people earning $70,000, $90,000, even $120,000 a year still feel like they're financially stuck. They have stable jobs, they pay their bills on time, they're doing what society told them to do. And yet, every month feels tight. The paycheck arrives and somehow disappears. But if you look closely at their finances, one number quietly stands out. Not the rent, not the groceries, the car payment. Let's imagine a very normal situation. A young professional in the United States or Western Europe, maybe 28 years old, a decent job in marketing, IT, healthcare, or finance. Their salary is $80,000 a year. After taxes, health insurance, and retirement deductions, they bring home around $4,700 per month. Now the monthly life begins. Rent or mortgage, $1,800, utilities and internet, $250, groceries, $450, health insurance or medical costs, $300. So far, that's about $2,800. Now comes the car. A relatively normal car for someone with a good job. Nothing flashy, just something reliable and comfortable. Monthly car payment, $650. Insurance, $180. Fuel, $200. That's about $1,030 per month just to keep the car moving. Now out a student loan payment, maybe $350 per month, and a credit card balance that quietly requires $150 minimum payments. Suddenly, the monthly total reaches around $4,330. And remember, the take-home income was $4,700. That leaves roughly $370 for everything else in life. Clothes, travel, unexpected expenses, saving for a home, investing for retirement. So what happens next? The credit card slowly becomes the pressure valve, and the cycle quietly continues. The interesting part is that the car didn't look like a big mistake at the time, because in isolation, the payment felt manageable. The dealership didn't talk about the full price of the car. They talked about the monthly number, only $650 a month. And psychologically, humans are very sensitive to monthly framing. It makes large financial decisions feel small. A $42,000 car suddenly feels like a $650 lifestyle upgrade. But the math tells a different story. Let's look at that same car more carefully. A $42,000 vehicle financed for 6 years at around 6 to 7% interest ends up costing roughly $50,000 in total payments. But the real cost isn't just the purchase. Add insurance, fuel, and maintenance over those 6 years. Now the car quietly costs closer to $80,000 of total life cash flow. And here's the part people rarely calculate. What happens if that same $650 monthly payment was invested instead? Let's say someone invested $650 every month into a simple index fund, earning about 7% annually. After 10 years, that money becomes roughly $110,000. After 20 years, it grows to about $340,000. And after 30 years, it approaches $790,000. The same monthly cash flow, two completely different futures. One becomes a depreciating machine in the driveway, the other becomes long-term financial freedom. So why do smart, educated people make this decision every day? It's rarely about transportation. It's about identity and social pressure. In many parts of the United States, Canada, and Europe, the car quietly acts as a status signal. Not an extreme luxury signal, just a signal that says, I'm doing well. Your coworkers drive nice cars. Your neighbors upgrade every few years. Social media constantly normalizes the idea that adulthood includes a financed vehicle. And because the system revolves around monthly payments, people rarely step back and ask the bigger question. Not, can I afford the payment, but is this the best use of my future cash flow?
Financially intelligent people tend to think about cars differently, not emotionally, not as a reward, but as a transportation tool with a cost ceiling. They often drive cars that are slightly below what their income technically allows, not because they're trying to appear frugal, but because they understand something subtle about money. Every fixed payment you add to your life quietly reduces your future flexibility. It makes career changes harder. It delays investing. It turns small financial stress into constant background pressure. And when several of these payments stack together, student loans, car loans, credit cards, the result is a life that looks financially successful from the outside, but feels financially tight on the inside. None of this means cars are bad. For many people, they're necessary. But the difference between a $25,000 car and a $45,000 car isn't just comfort or technology. It's often the difference between building wealth quietly and delaying it for a decade. And most people never notice the trade-off while it's happening, because the payment simply becomes part of the background noise of life. The car still starts every morning, the job continues, the paycheck arrives, and the financial future slowly adjusts around that one decision, quietly, month after month, year after year.
There's another layer to this story that most people never really see. Because the car payment doesn't just affect your monthly budget, it slowly shapes your life decisions. Imagine two people graduating at the same time. Both are 24 years old. Both land jobs paying around $65,000 a year. Their lives start almost identical. Same salary, same city, same basic expenses. But one small decision separates them. The first person buys a new $40,000 car. The monthly payment comes out to around $620. The second person buys a reliable used car for $16,000, no loan or maybe a very small one. At first, the difference between their lives feels almost invisible. Both go to work, both hang out with friends, both post normal photos online. But financially, something very quiet is happening. Every single month, one person has $620 less flexibility than the other. Not just in theory, in real decisions. 3 years later, an interesting opportunity appears. Maybe a new job in another city. It pays slightly more long-term, but the first year requires moving costs and a small pay adjustment. For the person with the car payment, the decision feels risky. Rent deposits, moving expenses, life uncertainty. That $620 payment suddenly becomes a psychological anchor. It pushes them toward the safer option, staying where they are. Meanwhile, the second person with the cheaper car doesn't feel the same pressure. They have more breathing room, more financial margin. And that margin quietly becomes freedom. This is something economists sometimes describe as financial friction. Every fixed payment in your life increases friction. It slows down your ability to move, to take risks, to adapt. And car payments are one of the most common sources of this friction because they're large, long-term, and extremely normalized. The auto industry understands this psychology very well. That's why car advertisements almost never talk about total cost. Instead, they focus on phrases like only $599 a month or zero down and easy financing. The entire marketing system is designed to shift your thinking from ownership cost to monthly comfort. And once people accept that mental framing, upgrading becomes easy. A slightly nicer car might only add $120 more per month, which doesn't feel dramatic. But small upgrades stacked over time can transform a financial life. A $450 payment becomes $580, then $620, then maybe $740 with insurance adjustments. And because raises at work often arrive slowly, these payments expand faster than income. This is how people earning six-figure salaries still end up feeling financially stuck. Not because they're irresponsible, but because their fixed lifestyle costs quietly grew faster than their financial awareness. There's also a psychological reward attached to cars that makes this harder to resist.
Cars deliver instant satisfaction. The moment you drive off the dealership lot, life feels upgraded. The seats smell new, the technology feels impressive. People notice. But financially meaningful decisions rarely provide that same immediate feeling. Investing $600 into an index fund doesn't feel exciting. Paying down debt doesn't produce compliments. Driving an older car doesn't create social validation. So the brain naturally leans toward the decision that feels better today, even if the long-term math is less favorable. If you observe people who quietly build wealth over long periods, you'll notice a pattern. They don't necessarily avoid spending, but they are extremely selective about fixed expenses. They understand something simple but powerful. Variable spending can be adjusted. Fixed payments are harder to escape. A spontaneous vacation might cost $1,500 once, but a $650 monthly payment lasts for 72 months. That's more than 2,000 days of financial commitment. And during those 2,000 days, life continues to change. Jobs change, economies shift, unexpected expenses appear, but the payment stays, waiting every month. Over time, the financially aware person begins asking a different type of question. Not, do I deserve a nicer car, or even can I afford this payment, but something quieter, something more strategic. They ask, what is this decision doing to my future options? Because in personal finance, the most powerful asset isn't just money, it's flexibility. The ability to move, to pivot careers, to invest during opportunities, to handle emergencies calmly. And flexibility usually comes from lower fixed obligations, not higher income alone. The car payment doesn't destroy financial futures overnight. That's why it's so easy to ignore. It works slowly, quietly, month by month, year by year, until one day someone looks at their finances in their late 30s or early 40s and wonders why building real wealth feels so delayed. Often, the answer isn't dramatic. It's simply a series of comfortable monthly decisions made years earlier. None of this means people should feel guilty about buying a car they enjoy. Transportation matters, comfort matters, life should still be lived. But financial clarity comes from understanding the true trade-offs behind everyday decisions. And once people see those trade-offs clearly, they tend to make slightly different choices. Not extreme ones, just slightly more thoughtful ones. And over time, those small shifts compound into a very different financial life.
There's also a long-term pattern that starts to appear once you look at car payments across an entire adult life. Not just one purchase, but the cycle. Because most people don't buy just one financed car. They repeat the process every few years. A typical timeline looks something like this. At age 25, someone finances their first real car. 5 or 6 years later, the loan ends. For a brief moment, they experience something interesting. No payment. Extra cash flow appears in their monthly budget. Maybe $500, $600, sometimes $700 suddenly becomes available. But instead of redirecting that money toward investing or savings, something predictable happens. They go back to the dealership. The old car still works perfectly fine, but it's starting to feel outdated. The new models have better screens, better safety features, better design, and once again, the conversation revolves around the monthly number. Your new payment would only be about $680. So the cycle resets. Another 5 or 6 years begins. Now imagine this repeating 3 or 4 times between the ages of 25 and 45. It's not unusual at all. In fact, it's the default financial path for millions of people across the United States, Canada, and Europe. Let's do some simple math again. If someone averages $600 per month in car payments for 20 years, that's $144,000 in payments. And that number doesn't include fuel, insurance, or maintenance, just the financing alone. Now, combine that with depreciation.
cars lose value continuously. So at the end of those 20 years, most of that $144,000 has simply turned into older vehicles that eventually get replaced. It's a large amount of money that never had the chance to grow. But the financial impact isn't only about the money spent, it's also about the time lost for compounding. Money invested in your 20s behaves very differently from money invested later in life. For example, investing $600 per month from age 25 to 35 can produce more long-term wealth than investing the same amount from age 35 to 50. Not because the amount is larger, but because time does most of the work. Every decade you delay consistent investing makes the climb steeper, and large fixed payments are one of the most common reasons that delay happens. Another interesting shift is happening in the car market itself. Over the last decade, vehicle prices have increased significantly. In many Western countries, the average new car price now sits around $45,000 to $50,000, which means the typical monthly payment has quietly climbed as well. In the United States, for example, average new car payments have moved close to $700 per month in recent years. For many households, that number now competes directly with housing costs as one of the largest monthly expenses. Yet, culturally, it still feels normal because everyone around us is doing it. This is where social comparison quietly influences financial behavior. Humans rarely evaluate decisions in isolation. We compare. Coworkers arrive at the parking lot in newer vehicles. Neighbors upgrade to larger SUVs. Friends post road trips in new car photos online. So even people who originally planned to spend modestly begin adjusting their expectations. Not dramatically, just slightly. But over time, those small adjustments accumulate into larger financial commitments. Financially thoughtful people tend to view this dynamic differently. They don't necessarily reject car ownership, but they separate transportation value from social value. Transportation value answers a simple question: does this car reliably get me where I need to go? Social value asks something else entirely. What does this car signal about my lifestyle? And those two values often cost very different amounts of money. Something interesting happens when people reduce the importance of social signaling in their financial decisions. They begin noticing how much calmer their financial life becomes. Monthly budgets feel less compressed. Unexpected expenses feel less stressful. Career decisions become more flexible. And perhaps most importantly, long-term investing becomes consistent rather than occasional. Consistency is where most wealth is quietly built, not through perfect timing, not through clever tricks, just through regular, uninterrupted investing over long periods. And uninterrupted investing usually requires low financial friction. It's also worth mentioning something rarely discussed in personal finance conversations. A lot of people don't regret buying an expensive car because of the car itself. They regret the timing. Buying a high-cost vehicle too early in life often carries a larger opportunity cost than buying it later in life. A $50,000 car at age 28 can delay investing during the most powerful compounding years. The same car purchased comfortably at age 45 may have almost no long-term financial impact. The difference isn't the object, it's the stage of life. Over time, financially aware individuals start to recognize that wealth building is often delaying certain upgrades, not avoiding them forever. The car can still happen, the lifestyle improvements can still happen, but they arrive later when the financial foundation is already strong. And when that foundation exists, those purchases stop creating pressure. They become choices. In the end, the car payment isn't inherently dangerous. It doesn't destroy financial futures overnight. It simply operates quietly in the background, reducing monthly flexibility, delaying investing, encouraging lifestyle inflation. And because the effect unfolds slowly, it rarely feels urgent until many years have already passed. Understanding this dynamic doesn't mean everyone should immediately change their lifestyle, but it does something more valuable. It allows people to see the true structure of their financial life, where the money flows, which payments control future decisions, and which choices quietly shape the next 10 or 20 years. Awareness alone often changes behavior, not dramatically, but just enough to create a different outcome over time.
There's one final detail about car payments that often goes unnoticed, and it has less to do with the car itself and more to do with how people measure financial progress. Most people judge their financial situation based on income. If the salary increases, life should feel easier. A promotion happens, the paycheck grows. So naturally, expectations grow too. Maybe the apartment upgrades, maybe vacations become more frequent, and very often the car changes as well. Because in many cultures, the car quietly acts as a visible symbol of progress. You worked hard, you moved up, so the lifestyle should reflect that. On the surface, this feels completely logical, but financially, something subtle begins to happen. Income rises, yet fixed costs rise almost at the same speed. Imagine someone who starts their career earning $60,000 per year. Their first car payment is around $380 per month. A few years later, they earn $85,000. Now a $620 car payment suddenly feels reasonable. Later, their salary reaches $110,000. At that stage, a $750 payment doesn't seem extreme at all. But notice what quietly happened. The car payment didn't stay constant. It scaled with income. So while earnings increased, the margin, the space where wealth actually grows, didn't expand as much as expected. This pattern has a name in economics. It's called lifestyle inflation, and vehicles are one of its most common expressions. But financially thoughtful people often approach income increases differently. When their salary grows, they don't immediately upgrade every visible part of their lifestyle. Instead, they allow a portion of that increase to expand their margin. Margin is simply the space between what you earn and what you've committed to spending. That space is where investing happens. It's where opportunity lives. And interestingly, margin often creates something more valuable than luxury. It creates calm. Think about two professionals earning the same salary. Both make $95,000 a year. From the outside, their lives might look similar, but internally, their financial structures can be completely different. One person has a $720 car payment, several subscription services, and credit card balances. The other has a modest car that's nearly paid off and fewer fixed obligations. When unexpected events happen, and they always do, these two people experience life very differently. A job change, a medical expense, a temporary economic slowdown. For the person with heavy fixed payments, these moments feel stressful immediately because the monthly commitments never pause. But for the person with lower obligations, the same events feel manageable, not because they earn more, but because their financial structure allows more breathing room. This is one of the quiet advantages of avoiding large recurring payments early in life. You're not just saving money, you're protecting flexibility. Flexibility allows people to take smarter long-term actions, to start businesses, to move cities, to go back to school, to invest when markets temporarily fall. All of these opportunities require one thing: room to maneuver, and large fixed payments gradually remove that room. There's also a deeper psychological effect. When people carry large monthly obligations, they often feel pressure to maintain their current income level at all costs, even if the job becomes exhausting, even if better opportunities exist elsewhere. The payment structure quietly locks them into stability, which might sound safe, but sometimes prevents growth. Meanwhile, someone with fewer obligations can evaluate career decisions more rationally. They're not trapped by the next bill. They have the freedom to choose based on long-term direction, not just immediate survival. Over decades, these small structural differences accumulate. Not dramatically at first, but gradually. One person's financial life feels slightly tight year after year. The other's feels slightly more open. More investable cash appears. More opportunities are taken. And eventually, the gap becomes noticeable. Not because of intelligence, not because of luck, but because of a series of quiet decisions about fixed costs. In the end, the car payment itself isn't the real issue. The deeper issue is automatic lifestyle scaling, the idea that every income increase should immediately produce a visible lifestyle upgrade.
When people resist that automatic upgrade, even just a little, something interesting happens. Their finances begin to stabilize, their investments grow more consistently, and over time, they reach a point where upgrades can happen without pressure. At that stage, buying a nicer car isn't a financial trap anymore. It's simply a purchase, one that doesn't reshape the entire structure of life. Most financial progress doesn't come from dramatic changes. It comes from noticing small patterns early, understanding how systems work, and adjusting decisions slightly before they become permanent habits. The car payment is just one example of that system. Quiet, normal, but surprisingly powerful over long periods of time.